The letter didn't come in a fancy envelope. It wasn't gold-embossed or scented with prestige. It came folded into a plain white rectangle with her name typed neatly on the front, Emma Carter. She nearly tossed it into the recycling bin with the rest of the week's school flyers and ads. But something about the weight of it, the way it didn't crinkle when she held it, made her pause. She slid her finger under the flap and unfolded the contents with mild curiosity. Then she stopped breathing. "Dear Miss Carter," it began, "we are pleased to invite you as a participant in the 2025 Harvard Junior Innovation Challenge, a competitive program designed for the most exceptional young minds in the country. After reviewing your recent submission to the National Youth Science and Logic Fair, our board was impressed with your creative problem-solving and advanced mathematical reasoning. While this challenge typically invites high school seniors and early college students, your submission compelled us to make an exception." Emma blinked. Then blinked again. Her stomach dropped in that terrifying, roller coaster kind of way, the kind where gravity doesn't just leave your body, it hurls it skyward and leaves your brain spinning. 12. She was 12 years old. And Harvard, wanted her to compete. Downstairs, her mom was vacuuming the living room, and the old machine roared loud enough to mask any sound. Emma stood frozen in the middle of the hallway, letter in hand, her backpack slipping from one shoulder. She wasn't even sure she'd read it right. Maybe it was a prank. Or a mistake. Or one of those weird contests that ends in asking you for a credit card number. She read the letter 3 more times. No mistake. No prank. No strings attached. The Innovation Challenge would start in 2 weeks. It would involve 4 stages of problem solving, culminating in a live final presentation at Harvard Science Center. The topics ranged from logic puzzles to applied computer science, and she'd be competing against kids who already knew things like differential equations and neural networks. What in the world was she doing on that list? What happens when you're just a kid and the world throws something impossibly big in your lap? Emma wasn't sure. But she had a feeling she was about to find out. Still holding the letter, she walked into the kitchen where the early evening sun filtered through the blinds. She laid the paper on the table and just stared at it. Her heart thudded so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Emma? You okay?" her mom's voice called from the hallway. Yeah. "Mom, can you come here for a sec?" Linda Carter walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her forehead shiny from cleaning and the day's shift at the hospital. "What's up?" Emma just pointed. Linda picked up the letter, read the heading, and then read the entire thing without saying a word. Her face moved from puzzled, to surprised, to stunned. "You. Harvard," she finally whispered. Emma nodded, lips pressed into a thin line. "Apparently." Linda sank into a chair and ran a hand through her dark, tied-back hair. She didn't speak for a long moment. When she finally looked up at Emma, there were tears in her eyes. "Honey. Do you realize what this means?" Emma shrugged. "I think it means I'm going to puke." Her mom laughed, wiping her eyes. "No, it means, this is huge. But are you sure you want to do it? It's going to be a lot. Pressure. Cameras. Older kids. Maybe even press coverage. Are you ready for that?" "I don't know," Emma said honestly. "I don't feel ready. But I want to be." They were both quiet again. Then her mom reached across the table and took her hand. "Let's figure it out together, okay?" Emma smiled, grateful for that. Even if her mind was still spinning, her mom had always been her anchor. She never made promises she couldn't keep, but she always reminded Emma that fear didn't mean she was weak, it meant she cared. That night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the glow of her desk lamp casting long shadows on her posters of rocket ships and constellations. Her room was filled with evidence of who she was. A model of the Mars rover she'd built last summer, her coding textbooks dog-eared and full of notes, and the certificate she won for designing a low-cost water purification system in 5th grade. But this? This was different. This wasn't a science fair at a school gym. This was Harvard. This was real. The next day, she showed the letter to her best friend, Jake. "No way," he said, eyes wide. "You're gonna be, like, famous. You'll probably meet Mark Zuckerberg. Or, like, Elon Musk's third cousin." Emma snorted. "It's not that kind of thing. It's just a challenge. Like a competition." Still. Harvard. That's insane. Jake had always been her partner in crime, ever since kindergarten, when they built a robot out of cereal boxes and duct tape and called it Captain Crunch. He was more into drawing and animation than science, but he admired her brain the way she admired his creativity. They were opposites in some ways, but they clicked. "You think I can actually do this?" she asked, voice lower than usual. Jake didn't answer right away. Then he looked her straight in the eyes. "You built a solar-powered cat feeder from scratch. You fixed Mr. Donovan's smartboard when the tech guy couldn't. You're the only person I know who finds calculus fun. So yeah, I think you can." She didn't respond, but the knot in her chest loosened just a little. Still, the days that followed were filled with nerves. Emma's inbox flooded with confirmation emails from the program. There were packets to fill out, waivers to sign, and a login portal that made her feel like she was entering a secret government project. Then came the schedule. 4 stages over 6 weeks. Each with increasing difficulty. Coding, logic, systems design, and finally, a real-world application pitch presented live. She'd be presenting to a panel of Harvard professors and industry leaders. And she'd be the youngest competitor by at least 5 years. Emma looked at the schedule, her hands shaking slightly. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "I either crash and burn, or I show them I belong." She thought about all the kids who would be watching the final event online. Maybe even some younger girls like her, wondering if they had a shot at doing something big. She didn't just want to win. She wanted to prove something. To herself. To the world. To every kid who felt too small for something too big. That night, she posted the letter on her bedroom wall. Right next to a sticky note that said, in Jake's handwriting. "Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's wrong." She took a deep breath, stared at the glowing blue light of her laptop, and whispered the same words she'd heard in her father's voice years ago, the last time she doubted herself. "One step at a time." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before the Harvard letter, before the media buzz, before the hush that fell over a room full of intellectual giants, Emma Carter was just a girl who liked questions more than answers. She'd always been like that. Even as a toddler, she didn't ask, why, to be annoying. She asked it because she truly wanted to understand. Why does thunder come after lightning? Why do people cry when they're happy? Why do toast crumbs fall under the fridge instead of beside it? Her mom used to joke that Emma interrogated the world. And the world, stubborn as it was, kept answering her back in pieces, never all at once. Emma's dad, James Carter, had been her biggest fan. A mechanical engineer who never quite made it big, he had the kind of mind that loved blueprints and the kind of heart that loved bedtime stories. When Emma was 5, he built her a toy rocket with blinking lights and a hollow capsule that could launch a marshmallow halfway across the living room. She'd squealed, then asked to see how the wiring worked. He died 3 years later. A car accident, sudden and senseless. Emma remembered the morning after, the silence in the house, the way her mom couldn't look her in the eye for hours, the blanket someone had wrapped around her shoulders even though it wasn't cold. Since then, the world hadn't felt quite as open. It had closed in around the edges, grown more careful, more fragile. She didn't stop asking questions, but some of them started to go unanswered. Her mom, Linda, did everything she could. Long nursing shifts at the hospital, working doubles just to keep the mortgage covered. There were nights when Emma would hear her crying softly in the kitchen, thinking her daughter was asleep. Emma never said anything. She just started waking up earlier to pack her own lunch. There wasn't much time for extracurriculars or fancy camps or traveling robotics teams. Emma's learning happened in the corners of time, before school, during study hall, in the stolen moments between chores and homework. She built computers from second-hand parts and read math theory on the city bus. Her 6th grade science teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, had been the first to notice something unusual. "Emma," she'd said one day after class, "do you realize most kids don't enjoy solving matrix equations?" Emma had blinked. "They don't." Mrs. Reynolds had laughed, one of those deep, belly laughs that made you feel like the joke wasn't on you, but with you. From that point on, she became Emma's quiet champion. When the school couldn't afford better equipment, Mrs. Reynolds brought in materials from her own college lab. When Emma mentioned her dream of attending MIT someday, Mrs. Reynolds didn't blink. She nodded and said, "Why not Harvard too?" The thing was, Emma didn't feel like a genius. Genius was something people called other kids. The ones with summer research internships and parents who made science kits part of their bedtime routine. Emma was just a girl trying not to fall behind while keeping her world upright. Her best friend Jake had seen both sides of her, the wide-eyed inventor and the worried daughter. They'd met in 2nd grade when Emma had been reading a book on Fibonacci sequences during recess and Jake offered her half of his peanut butter sandwich in exchange for an explanation. "I'm not even hungry," he'd shrugged. "Just think it's cool that you know words like Fibon, whatever." They'd been inseparable ever since. Jake made the world lighter for her. While she lived in logic and equations, he lived in colors and characters. He dreamed of making animated films for Pixar. She dreamed of sending a robot to Mars. Somewhere in the middle, they made sense. Jake was the only one who knew about the shoebox under her bed. The one labeled, "Dad's Projects." Inside were napkin sketches, old blueprints, and a tiny notebook filled with ideas her dad never had time to finish. One of the projects was a design for a water filtration device using gravity and a modified bicycle pump. It was the idea Emma had taken and improved to win her last science fair. Some nights, when her mom was working late and the house felt too quiet, Emma would sit cross-legged on the floor and read her dad's old notes out loud like he was there listening. There were things she wished she could have asked him. How to deal with pressure. How to trust your instincts. How to make it in a world that sometimes felt like it wasn't made for people like her. The Harvard Challenge had brought all those feelings rushing back. As much as she wanted to believe in herself, part of her couldn't shake the doubt that crept in late at night. She remembered a school field trip to a local university last year. The tour guide, a graduate student with tired eyes, had smiled politely when Emma asked a question about quantum encryption. But later, she overheard him saying to a colleague, "Cute kid." But those are grown-up questions. The comment hadn't meant to sting. But it did. So when the Harvard letter came, it wasn't just an opportunity, it was a test. Of who she was. Of whether the world would finally see her not as a cute kid, but as someone worth listening to. Still, she didn't know if she was ready. Mrs. Reynolds had told her once, "People think being smart means you always know the answer. It doesn't. Sometimes it means being brave enough to ask the next question." Sitting on her bed now, with the letter taped to the wall and her heart thudding in her ears, Emma realized this challenge was going to be more than equations and experiments. It was going to be a journey into everything she feared and everything she hoped for. Her mom knocked on the door, then came in holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "I figured you could use a brain break," she said, handing one to Emma and sitting beside her. They sipped in silence for a while. "Do you remember that time you built a bridge out of spaghetti noodles for your 3rd grade class?" her mom asked, smiling at the memory. It collapsed, Emma said, groaning. Yes, but not before it held more weight than anyone else's. You were the only one who figured out how to distribute the pressure. Emma smirked. It also splattered marinara sauce everywhere. Her mom nudged her gently. You've always figured things out, Em. You're not just book smart. You're heart smart. That matters too. Emma looked at her, cocoa steaming between her palms. What if I mess up? What if I go and everyone just thinks I'm a little kid who got lucky? Then you show them who you really are, her mom said. And you remind them that courage isn't about being the oldest or the smartest. It's about showing up when it matters. Emma didn't answer right away. But inside, something started to settle. Not confidence exactly. Not yet. But a seed of it. A spark. She would show up. Because deep down, the girl who liked questions wasn't afraid of not knowing. She was afraid of never trying. The weekend after the letter came, everything changed. The house, the air, even the way Emma carried her backpack, as if every step forward now meant something bigger. But underneath her quiet excitement, an invisible weight had started to form in her chest, settling in like fog. Emma had read the Harvard Challenge details a dozen times. She memorized the categories, the structure, the expectations. The first round alone would involve constructing a logical algorithm to optimize resource allocation in a simulated city planning model. In simple terms, she had to outsmart a software program, and her competitors, by designing a solution that solved a problem with hundreds of variables. Her brain loved that kind of thing. But loving something and surviving it in front of a panel of Ivy League professors were two entirely different things. At breakfast, her mom poured orange juice and tried to keep her tone light, but the corners of her mouth twitched nervously. So. I looked up the program last night, she said, watching Emma closely. They don't normally invite kids under 15. You really are an exception. Emma nodded, chewing on her toast without much appetite. Yeah. I saw that too. Her mom hesitated, then sat down across from her. Sweetheart, I'm proud of you. I really am. But I need to ask, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, it's not too late to say no. No one would blame you. Emma looked up. There it was. That soft, careful tone her mom used when she was worried but didn't want to scare her. The same tone she used when Emma was in 3rd grade and had tried to climb the neighbor's tree to retrieve a stuck frisbee. I don't want to say no, Emma said, then paused. But. I'm scared. Her mom reached across the table and squeezed her hand gently. That's not a bad thing. Scared means it matters. Emma took a deep breath. What if I get up there and my brain just stops? What if they realize I don't belong? Emma, do you know how many people feel like that? Even adults. Even the people who are already in Harvard. It's called imposter syndrome. Emma frowned. It has a name. Her mom chuckled. Oh yeah. Big name. It's that feeling like you've tricked everyone into thinking you're good at something, and any second, they're going to find out you're a fraud. But you're not. You're not tricking anyone. Emma thought about that. She'd always assumed that kind of self-doubt was just her being, well, her. You know, her mom continued, your dad used to feel it too. He once turned down a chance to speak at an engineering conference because he thought he wasn't qualified enough. Even though the whole thing was based on one of his designs. Emma's eyes widened. Dad? Seriously? Linda nodded. He was brilliant. But he was human, too. Just like you. The conversation helped. A little. But as the week went on and news of Emma's invitation began to trickle into her school, her anxiety started to spiral. At first, it was just a few classmates whispering in the hallway. Did you hear about Emma? She's doing something with Harvard. No way. She's in 7th grade. Then the whispers turned into questions. And the questions turned into comments. She probably cheated her way in. Her mom's a nurse, how would she have connections? Even some teachers didn't know how to react. One of them, Mr. Keller, handed her back a math quiz with a raised eyebrow and said, "Well, I guess this was easy for you now that you're a Harvard girl." Emma didn't know what to say. She hadn't asked for the attention. And she definitely hadn't asked to feel like a walking news story. The only person who hadn't changed was Jake. They were sitting under their usual tree at lunch, an old maple near the edge of the playground where the noise didn't reach them as much. "You okay?" he asked, handing her a juice pouch. She nodded, but not very convincingly. "I feel like everyone's waiting for me to mess up." Jake ripped the corner off his granola bar and shrugged. "Let them wait. Then you surprise them. But what if I do mess up? Then you do. And you still got invited to something 99% of people will never even see. That's already a win." Emma smiled weakly. "You make it sound simple." "It kind of is," Jake said. "They gave you a chance. That means they already think you're good enough. It's not your job to prove them wrong." Emma leaned back against the tree, letting the cool bark press into her back. She didn't say it out loud, but Jake's words stuck with her long after the bell rang. That night, after dinner, she sat at her desk staring at the challenge website again. The countdown timer glowed red at the top, 13 days remaining. She opened her email to find her first official assignment, a prep packet with example problems, simulations, and a resource guide. She clicked on the first simulation. The screen loaded with a 3D map of a fictional city called Lumia. Buildings, streets, public systems. Her task: optimize emergency resource response with minimal cost and time delays, accounting for weather, budget, and human variables. It was beautiful. Complex. Elegant. Her fingers moved slowly across the keys as she began testing ideas. At first, everything she tried failed. She rerouted ambulances through faster lanes, then crashed the budget. She cut fuel costs, then response time went too high. She tried one solution that worked almost perfectly. Until a simulated rainstorm threw off every prediction. By midnight, she was still at it. And for the first time since the letter arrived, she wasn't thinking about her classmates. Or the judges. Or the whispers in the hallway. She was just thinking about the problem. And that was when she felt it, flow. That weird, wonderful moment when everything clicks, and your brain forgets fear and just moves. Her mom peeked in later, eyes tired. "You're still up?" "Yeah, sorry. I lost track of time." Linda smiled. "That's when I know you're doing what you love." Emma looked at her, eyes bright with the spark that fear had tried to dim. "I think I can do this, Mom. I really do." And in that moment, it wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about finally beginning to believe, maybe, that everyone who believed in her had been right all along. The morning the official Harvard Junior Innovation Challenge opened its virtual gates, Emma felt like the world had somehow grown quieter and louder at the same time. Quiet in the way her own thoughts pressed in, full of equations and variables and timelines. Loud in the way the rest of the world suddenly seemed to care. Her inbox was full. Emails from the competition organizers, notifications from curious reporters asking for a quote, even a request from a local podcast to feature her story. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she logged into the challenge portal, hands slightly sweaty, and clicked Begin. The interface was sleek, built with the kind of polish that screamed elite institution. A simple header read. Stage 1, Systems Thinking and Resource Logic. Welcome to the Lumia simulation. Your goal is to develop an adaptive response algorithm that improves emergency resource deployment across multiple zones under unpredictable real-world variables. Budget, fuel, traffic density, and random events, weather, social unrest, system failures, will influence your score. You will have 96 hours. Good luck. Emma exhaled. Her brain immediately went to work. For the first 6 hours, she barely moved. The only sound in her room was the soft tapping of keys and the occasional frustrated sigh. She built a basic algorithm that mapped routes for ambulances, then added priority weights for certain emergencies. She coded in a weather tracking function that adjusted travel times based on forecast changes. She failed. Then she tried again. On her fourth test run, she finally got something close to stable. A 74% efficiency rate, well above the starting benchmark. But she knew the other competitors wouldn't stop there. She needed over 90 to have a shot. "Emma, eat something," her mom called from downstairs. In a minute, she yelled back, eyes glued to her code. Later that night, around 11 p.m., she heard a soft knock on her door. Her mom peeked in holding a grilled cheese and a glass of water. "Don't make me use mom voice," she said with a tired smile. "You need fuel." Emma took the plate with a sheepish grin. "Thanks. I lost track of time." Her mom walked in, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at the simulation on Emma's screen. "Is that your city?" "Yep. Lumia. My disaster-plagued masterpiece." Her mom chuckled. "Looks intense." Emma pointed at a cluster of blinking icons. "That's a fire that started near the hospital. I rerouted traffic flow to make way for emergency vehicles, but now the West District is underserved." Her mom blinked, nodding slowly. "Okay. I'll take your word for it." Emma paused, then turned serious. "Mom, what if I'm not the smartest one?" "You're not," her mom said instantly. "But that's not why you're here." Emma stared. Her mom smiled. "You're here because you know how to keep going when things aren't perfect. Because you don't quit when it's hard. Harvard didn't pick you because you already know everything, they picked you because you learn faster than most people recover." Emma let that settle. The next day brought the leaderboard. Her score: 88.4. Rank, number 6 out of 200. Her stomach twisted. Sixth place was incredible, but it also meant 5 people were already ahead. And some were college freshmen. One was a 16-year-old from India who had apparently coded an adaptive AI model from scratch. Emma sat back and rubbed her temples. That afternoon, Jake caught up with her outside school. She hadn't answered his texts the night before. "You look like someone ran your brain through a blender," he said. "I got 6th. Jake blinked. "Out of how many?" 200. His eyes widened. "That's amazing." Emma shook her head. "It's not enough. I wanted top 5. I need to win." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Since when is 6th place in a national Ivy League challenge not enough?" Emma didn't answer. Jake stopped walking. "Emma, you're doing this thing where you start to disappear inside your own pressure bubble." She frowned. "I'm not disappearing." "Yes, you are. You stopped eating lunch with me. You didn't even tell me how your first test went. You're not a machine, you know." Emma felt the sting in his voice. It wasn't angry, just disappointed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. I can't mess this up. Not after everything. Not after they picked me when they didn't have to." Jake softened. "You won't mess it up. And even if you do, that doesn't mean you don't deserve to be there." Emma looked away. "Tell that to the kids at school. Or the ones in the comments section." She hadn't meant to look. But curiosity had gotten the best of her. When a local news station picked up the story, the internet had opinions. "Harvard's desperate for PR. No way a 12-year-old can handle that level of work. This is a gimmick." Watch her crash by round 2. Some were kind, supportive. Others weren't. And the worst one sounded like the voice in her own head. That night, Emma stayed up late again, working on improvements to her code even though the first challenge had already closed. She couldn't help it. The voice of doubt had found its way in. Just before midnight, she got an unexpected notification, a private message on the competition portal. From Lucas R. Subject, just curious. Hey. 6th place is impressive. I'm Lucas, guess we're competing. You really 12? She stared at the message. Lucas R. was in 2nd place. His profile showed he was 17, already interning at a major tech company. Emma hesitated, then typed back. Yeah. Weird, right? Seconds later. Lucas. Not weird. Surprising. Also, kinda awesome. Don't let the trolls get to you. Emma blinked. Then smiled. Maybe not everyone in this competition wanted to see her fail. Still, the pressure was mounting. Tomorrow, the next challenge would be released. And it would be harder. The simulation would be replaced by something real-world, a case study in systems design and a solution proposal that had to be defended with data. She closed her laptop and stared at the ceiling. The fear hadn't gone away. If anything, it had grown. But now, right next to it, something else was growing, too. Fire. When Emma woke up the next morning, her phone was already buzzing. Subject, Stage 2 Challenge released. From Harvard Junior Innovation Team. She sat up straight, wiped sleep from her eyes, and clicked. This time, there was no city simulation. No 3D model, no blinking fire icons. Just a PDF with 27 pages of dense text, diagrams, and a 3-line prompt at the top that nearly made her drop her phone. Design a scalable solution to a real-world water crisis in a low-resource environment. Your proposal must include technical feasibility, budgetary analysis, and community impact projection. Finalists will present to a live panel in 5 days. Emma stared at the screen. This wasn't just coding anymore. It was engineering. It was planning. It was presenting. Live. Her palms instantly began to sweat. She opened the packet and began scrolling. The case study focused on a remote village in northern Kenya, Barani. A community of 4,000 people with limited infrastructure, seasonal droughts, and no centralized water system. Women were walking up to 6 hours a day just to fetch barely drinkable water. It wasn't just hypothetical. It was happening. Emma leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Something in her chest twisted, not fear, not yet. Something else. A quiet, growing sense of weight. This was real. These were real people. Not numbers. Not code. And that changed everything. By noon, she'd filled an entire notebook with diagrams and notes. Her desk was covered in sketches, some half-erased, others circled aggressively. She was pacing her room, muttering to herself. Solar pump. Too expensive. Gravity-fed system. Depends on elevation. What about filtration, charcoal layers? Her mom peeked in, eyes wide. You okay in here? It sounds like you're arguing with a ghost. Emma glanced at her notebook and grinned weakly. Not a ghost. Just myself. Her mom walked in and glanced at the papers. Whoa. This looks like a civil engineering thesis. It kind of is. Her mom sat beside her. This isn't just a school project, is it? Emma shook her head. It's not even about winning anymore. This actually matters. And that's when the pressure doubled. She wasn't just representing herself now. She was holding someone else's reality in her hands. She did what she always did when her mind went into overdrive, called Jake. He answered on the first ring. Tell me you finally ate something. Later. I need your brain. Jake laughed. Well, good news, it's free and mostly unoccupied. Emma explained the challenge, pacing as she talked. So it's not just a design, she finished. It's a defense. I have to explain it to a panel of judges in a live session. Like a science fair on steroids, Jake said. Exactly. Except instead of baking soda volcanoes, they want full-scale humanitarian solutions. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then, you remember your dad's notebook? Emma froze. Of course. The old spiral one. The one under her bed. She pulled it out immediately. Page 17. A sketch design he'd titled Village Flow, Gravity-Powered Purification. It was rough. Incomplete. But brilliant. He'd drawn a hillside layout, showing how water could be routed from higher terrain using simple tubing, collected in tanks, and filtered using natural sedimentation and charcoal layers. It didn't require electricity. Just elevation, basic materials, and proper setup. Emma stared at it, her heart racing. She could build on this. She would. The next 5 days blurred. She barely slept. By day, she was emailing NGOs for data, watching documentaries, researching case studies on water sustainability. She learned about flow rates, head pressure, biosand filtration. She spoke with a Kenyan-American civil engineer on a Reddit AMA who offered her a few tweaks to improve her model. By night, she built her pitch. She used diagrams. Budget charts. Community scheduling modules. Jake helped her rehearse the defense. Slower, he'd say. You talk like you're trying to outpace a train. Or, that last part, make it real. Talk about the people, not just the pipes. She started practicing in front of the mirror. Hi, my name is Emma Carter, and I believe access to clean water should never be a privilege. It should be a right. Each time, her voice grew stronger. Not louder, clearer. By the fourth night, she finally said something she hadn't been able to believe before. I think I'm ready. Jake nodded. You are. The live session took place over Zoom. Emma wore her best sweater, the one her mom had bought her for her 5th grade promotion ceremony, and sat with perfect posture, trying not to bite her lip. She was one of 10 finalists. A digital waiting room. Names on a screen. Lucas R. was there too. He sent a quick private message. Good luck. You got this. Emma smiled. Then the screen flashed. Now presenting, Emma Carter, age 12, Village Flow, a gravity-driven water solution for Barani. She swallowed. Clicked unmute. And began. Her voice shook at first. Her slides stuttered as she clicked. But then she looked into the camera and imagined her dad sitting behind it. She saw her mom beside her. Jake at the back of the room, giving her a thumbs up. And the words came. She explained how her design used elevation and natural filtration layers to create a reliable, low-cost system. She broke down the budget, $100 in local materials, $700 in training, zero reliance on fossil fuels. She showed how women could reclaim over 20 hours a week. How disease rates would drop. And then she paused. It's not perfect, she said honestly. But it's real. And I believe if we can make one village safer, cleaner, and freer, then maybe we can do more. She finished. Silence. Then one of the judges, a professor in environmental engineering, spoke up. Miss Carter, how did you come up with this? Emma blinked. I found the bones of the idea in my dad's old sketchbook. He passed away when I was 9. I finished it. Silence again. But not empty. Full. Full of something heavy, and human, and sacred. After the session, the panel muted themselves to deliberate. Emma stared at the screen. Then a message popped up from Lucas. You left the room speechless. Seriously. Wow. And for the first time since the whole thing began, Emma let herself smile without doubt. She hadn't just competed. She'd shown up as herself. And that was more than enough. Emma didn't sleep that night. Not because she was anxious, but because something in her had shifted. Like the tight spring inside her that had been coiled since the Harvard letter first arrived had finally, unspooled. The moment her presentation ended, she sat at her desk, staring at her blank screen. For once, there were no simulations running, no design tabs open. Just stillness. Downstairs, her mom was quietly humming in the kitchen. A lullaby she used to sing when Emma couldn't fall asleep as a kid. Something about stars and promises. It was familiar. Grounding. And yet, the whole world suddenly felt different. Her email pinged once. Then again. Then again. She clicked it open. The first was from the Harvard Junior Innovation Team. Subject, Stage 2 Evaluation in Progress. Thank you for your thoughtful presentation. Judges are currently deliberating. Results for the top 5 finalists will be posted in 48 hours. The second was from an address she didn't recognize. Subject. Your idea might save my village. Emma's heart skipped. The message was short. From a university student in Nairobi who had seen a recap of her presentation posted to the competition's livestream archive. Hi Emma. I just watched your solution for Barani. That village is about 150 kilometers from where my mother grew up. We've tried many things. Your gravity-fed idea is elegant. Not charity. Sustainability. You're the first outsider I've heard describe something that makes sense without needing foreign donations. Just, thank you. You gave me hope. Moses N. Emma stared at the screen, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. Hope. That wasn't a grade. That wasn't a ranking. That was impact. She replied with a simple thank you. But her heart was hammering in her chest. She wasn't just solving for scores anymore. She was solving for people. And people were watching. The next day at school was surreal. Kids who had ignored her the week before were suddenly trailing behind her in the hallway. I saw your video, one girl whispered in math class. Wait, you presented to Harvard? A boy asked in homeroom. Like, actual Harvard? Even Mr. Keller, her dry-witted math teacher, handed her a quiz with a rare smile. You used to intimidate me, Carter, he said. Now I'm just impressed. Emma didn't know how to respond. The attention made her skin itch a little. She wasn't used to being seen. Jake, of course, was unfazed. At lunch, he plopped down beside her at their usual tree, opened a bag of gummy bears, and held it out. Brain fuel, he said. Emma grinned. You know, it's weird. A week ago, no one even looked at me unless I had a calculator out. Fame, Jake said, popping a red bear into his mouth, is a fickle beast. They both laughed. But underneath the joke, she felt it, that tugging thing inside her. Pride. And something close to pressure again. Not from Harvard. Not from rankings. From herself. Because now she knew what it felt like to matter. To be heard. And she didn't want to go back to being invisible. The results were posted on a Friday. Emma didn't look right away. She didn't even open her laptop. Instead, she went for a walk around the block. Her heart felt like it was trying to punch a hole through her ribs. It was raining lightly, cold drops brushing her cheeks like tiny reminders that she was alive. Her sneakers soaked quickly. She didn't care. When she got back, Her mom was waiting with her laptop already open. "I didn't peek," she promised. "I figured it should come from you." Emma sat down. Her fingers trembled as she clicked the link. A white page. The Harvard emblem. A list of names. She scanned quickly. Top 5 finalists. 1. Lucas R. CA. 2. Priya K. TX. 3. Emma Carter, IL. 4. Dante M. New York. 5. May H. MA. Third. She gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Her mom leaned in and read it, then screamed. Actually screamed. Third. Emma nodded, eyes wide, unable to speak. Her mom pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. "You did it. You really, really did it." Emma buried her face in her mom's shoulder, tears forming for the first time since this whole wild ride began. Not from sadness. Not even from relief. From the deep, earth-shaking realization that she belonged. That night, she got a call. Not a text. Not an email. An actual call. From a 617 area code. "Hello. Hi. Is this Emma Carter?" "Yes. This is Dr. Eliza Montgomery. I'm the head of research development at the Harvard Center for Innovation in Global Engineering. We reviewed your presentation. Not just as part of the competition, but, well, let's say we've had a few conversations since." Emma held her breath. "Your idea for Barani is practical, scalable, and, frankly, elegant. We'd like to ask your permission to explore prototyping it in partnership with our Summer Fellows program." Emma nearly dropped the phone. "You want to build it? Like, actually build it?" "If you're interested," Dr. Montgomery said warmly, "yes. Of course, you'd retain credit. We'd have a graduate fellow mentor the project, but we want your design." Emma blinked, barely able to find her voice. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes, I'm interested." "Wonderful. We'll send the paperwork by Monday." "Congratulations again, Emma. This is just the beginning." As the call ended, Emma sat frozen for a full minute. Then she ran downstairs, phone still in hand, shouting, "MOM." The next few days were a blur of interviews, papers to sign, meetings with real engineers who called her Miss Carter and asked for her input with complete seriousness. But the moment that stayed with her most came quietly. Late one evening, after everything had calmed, she was alone in her room. She pulled the old notebook out from under her bed again. Her dad's sketchbook. She opened to the page with his original idea. Then carefully, she turned to a blank one. She wrote at the top. Village Flow V2, Field Implementation Plan. Inspired by James Carter. Designed by Emma Carter, age 12. She smiled, a small, quiet thing that carried the weight of everything she'd fought through. This was only chapter 1 of her story. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't just chasing answers anymore. She was one. It started small. Just a post. A screenshot of Emma's name on the leaderboard, shared by a Twitter account that tracked youth competitions. Then a few retweets. A blog post. A local newspaper headline, Illinois girl, 12, breaks into Ivy League finals. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like exposure. Like standing in front of a glass wall with people peering in, dissecting everything. Emma didn't notice it at first. She was too caught up in the whirlwind of Zoom calls and planning meetings with the Harvard Fellows. She was finally doing what she loved, refining blueprints, reviewing data from Barani, adjusting the water flow model based on new elevation maps. They spoke to her like a peer, like an equal. But the comments found her anyway. Not in her inbox. Not face to face. In the cracks. On message boards. Under YouTube clips of her presentation. This is obviously staged. No way a 12-year-old did that alone. Where are her parents? Letting a kid play scientist with African lives. Watch, this will fall apart in real-world conditions. Emma read them late one night after a strategy meeting, thinking it was harmless curiosity. Just a quick check. Just one article. One thread. But the words hit like static under her skin, itchy and invisible and impossible to shake off. She didn't tell her mom. Didn't tell Jake. She just shut her laptop and stared at the dark ceiling, the glow of her desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The next morning, she skipped breakfast. Her mom noticed but didn't push. Just placed a banana on her desk and kissed the top of her head on the way out. That small gesture made her throat tighten. She wasn't supposed to be fragile. She was supposed to be extraordinary. At school, things weren't much better. The whispers followed her now. Emma, the Harvard girl. Emma, the genius. Emma, who didn't even act like a real kid. In science class, someone muttered loud enough for her to hear, "She probably thinks she's better than all of us." Emma didn't respond. She just scribbled harder in her notebook, pretending to be focused, pretending not to care. By lunchtime, she couldn't breathe. She left the cafeteria without eating and sat behind the gym, pulling her knees to her chest. She wasn't crying. Not exactly. But her chest felt heavy, like something had been stacking bricks on top of her while she slept. Jake found her 15 minutes later. He didn't say anything right away. Just sat next to her and passed her a juice box. She took it with numb fingers. "You okay?" he asked finally. Emma didn't look at him. "Do you think I'm fake?" Jake blinked. "What?" "I mean, people are saying I didn't do it. That someone wrote it for me. That it's just PR." Jake turned to her fully now, eyes sharp. "You think Harvard picks finalists for PR?" Emma shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe. Maybe I got lucky." Jake shook his head. "Emma, you didn't get lucky. You are the work. I watched you build that solution from scratch. I've seen your sketches, your code, your breakdowns of elevation flow. No one gave you that. You earned it." She stared at the grass. He nudged her. "And by the way, everyone calling you fake? They wouldn't last 5 minutes doing what you do. They wouldn't even know where to start." Emma wanted to believe him. She really did. But self-doubt had a sticky way of worming through even the kindest words. That night, she stayed up late again, not to study, but to second-guess every decision she'd made. She opened her old coding files, her blueprints, her notes from the fellowship meetings. Looking for cracks. Looking for proof she'd cheated or gotten too much help or didn't deserve any of it. But all she found was herself. Every line, every correction, every scribbled margin note. It was all hers. Still, the weight didn't lift. Until a letter arrived. It wasn't an email. It wasn't digital. It came in a cream-colored envelope with no return address. Just her name written in careful, looping script. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and a photo. The letter was handwritten. "Dear Emma. We heard about your project here in Barani. I am the head teacher at our village school. My daughter walks with me each morning to fetch water. Your design gave us something we haven't felt in a long time, hope. I printed your plans and showed them to my students. One of them, he's 10, said, if she's 12 and she cares about us, maybe I can grow up to build things too. We don't know if your design will work here. But we do know you made us feel seen. That matters more than you know. With gratitude. Salim O." The photo was a simple one. 4 children standing in front of a blackboard. Holding up a printed page, Emma's diagram. She stared at it for a long time. Then she finally cried. Not out of sadness. Not out of fear. Out of something else. Out of the realization that this, not the rankings, not the headlines, was the reason she started. That picture reminded her who she was building for. Who she had always been building for. Not judges. Not trolls. Not even Harvard. But the kids who didn't get to dream big because no one ever looked their way. She taped the photo to the wall above her desk. And below it, she wrote in marker. Seen. Heard. Worthy. That night, she slept without checking a single comment. And in the morning, she woke up with something steadier than confidence. Purpose. It was still a long way to the finish line. But Emma Carter had stopped running from the noise. She was walking toward the future, head high, eyes clear. And this time, nothing was going to shake her. 2 weeks after the letter from Barani arrived, Emma was called into an impromptu video meeting with Dr. Montgomery. She sat up straight in her chair, hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, palms clammy against her notebook. On the other end of the screen, Dr. Montgomery's face appeared, beaming with something more than professionalism. I'll keep it short, Emma, she said, eyes twinkling behind thin silver glasses. We've secured partial funding from a humanitarian research foundation. They're willing to support a field prototype of your design in Barani. But here's the surprise. They want you to come. Emma blinked. To Kenya? Dr. Montgomery nodded. 2 weeks. You'd work alongside one of our graduate fellows and a local engineer. You'll be supervised, of course. Your mother would join. But you'd be on site. In Barani. Seeing it firsthand. Emma couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. We've cleared the travel with your school. It would be considered an academic sabbatical. Harvard will provide a curriculum supplement while you're gone. Your mother already said she'd take the time off. But before we move forward, we need your yes. Emma looked down at her notebook. Then back at the screen. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. The next 2 weeks were a blur of paperwork, shots, packing, nervous jitters, and Google searches about Kenya's climate and customs. Emma had never traveled outside the country before. She had never needed a passport until now. She hugged Jake goodbye like she was leaving for the moon, and he handed her a hand-drawn map of emergency gummy bear zones. Try not to solve climate change while you're gone, he said. Leave some world problems for the rest of us. Emma laughed, but when she turned away to board the plane, she felt it, the weight of goodbye, and the weight of something even bigger. This was real now. The flight was long, crossing time zones Emma couldn't track, and by the time they landed in Nairobi, her eyes were gritty with exhaustion. But then she stepped out of the airport and the air hit her, dry, warm, alive in a way she couldn't explain. The noise was different. The colors were sharper. The sky stretched wider than she had ever seen. They drove for hours to reach Barani. The farther they went from the city, the more the roads turned to dust and gravel. She watched the landscape shift through the window, wide plains, distant mountains, goats wandering alongside the road, children running barefoot along fences. Her mind, usually a whirlpool of code and numbers, had gone completely still. Then they arrived. Barani was smaller than she'd pictured. Simpler. But also more beautiful. Rows of sun-baked homes made of clay and corrugated steel. Smiling faces. Laughter floating across the village square. A single dusty soccer ball rolling between 2 barefoot boys. Salim was waiting. He was older than she expected, tall, with a calm voice and steady hands. He shook her hand like she was a visiting diplomat. You are younger than I imagined, he said. But your mind, older than most I have met. Emma smiled, unsure what to say. That evening, they walked the village together. Salim showed her the old well, dry. The rusted water drums. The spot where women gathered every morning to begin the long walk to the stream. They wake before the sun, Salim explained. And return when it is highest. Carrying more than water. They carry time they'll never get back. Emma felt her throat tighten. She had seen the numbers. But now she saw the people behind them. The next morning, she met Michael, a grad student from Harvard who would help her test the prototype. He treated her like a teammate from the first moment. No condescension. No hesitation. Just respect. They spent hours under the sun, unrolling PVC piping, setting up filtration barrels, digging into the hill just behind the village where the elevation allowed for a gravity drop. Emma adjusted the charcoal layers herself, her small hands black with ash and grit, her shirt stained with sweat and dust. Each night, she recorded notes in her journal. Day 3, valve sticking. Possible mineral buildup. Replacing with wider gauge. Day 5, first flow test. Small trickle. But clean. Actually clean. Day 7, it works. We're filling a full 50-gallon drum in 20 minutes. The villagers began watching the setup with interest. Then curiosity turned to hope. And one morning, when Emma walked out with her notebook tucked under her arm, she saw something she would never forget. A group of girls, 5 or 6, no older than her, were standing at the edge of the system, cups in hand. The water flowed steadily. Clear. Drinkable. One girl took a sip and giggled. Emma's mom put her hand on her shoulder. "You did that," she whispered. Emma didn't answer. She just stood there, eyes wide, heart full. Later that night, there was a small celebration. Someone played music on a cracked speaker. Salim roasted maize. Children danced around a fire while adults clapped and sang. Emma sat beside her mother and Michael and watched the flames flicker against the wide African sky. Salim stood and raised his glass. "To the girl who brought water," he said. "Not just to our village. But to our hope." Emma didn't know what to do with that kind of praise. She just smiled and blinked hard against the tears. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a beginner. But for the first time, that didn't feel like a limitation. It felt like a promise. When they left Barani 3 days later, she hugged Salim and promised to send new plans once they tested the system longer. She left her notebook behind, with diagrams, notes, even little cartoons of the team, so the village school could keep learning. On the plane home, she watched the land disappear beneath her and whispered to herself, "This is just the start." And deep down, she knew it was true. Not just for her. But for every girl who thought they had to wait to matter. Emma Carter had gone from simulation to reality. From hidden genius to global changemaker. And the story was far from over. When the wheels of the plane touched back down in Chicago, Emma expected the world to feel the same. The streets were still gray with leftover winter slush. Her neighborhood still smelled faintly of car exhaust and corner store pizza. But something inside her had shifted so deeply that the familiarity of it all now felt distant, like walking through a house you once lived in, but no longer fit. She stepped off the plane, clutching the small cloth bracelet one of the Barani girls had tied around her wrist the night before she left. It was made of thread, sun-faded pink and yellow, and barely clung to her thin arm. But it held more than color. It held memory. It held meaning. Jake met her at the airport with a sign that read, "Welcome home, Miss World Domination." His grin was wide and lopsided and perfect. "You were on the news," he said immediately. "Like, actual TV. I saw your face next to a split screen of Barani and Anderson Cooper." Emma laughed. "That's disturbing. I also saved all the gummy bears you left behind." "That's heroic." As they walked out into the brisk Chicago air, Emma felt a chill run through her, not from the temperature, but from something else. Anticipation. Or maybe a quieter kind of fear. The kind that shows up after the applause fades and real life creeps back in. The first week home was strange. Her house felt too quiet after the hum of Barney nights. Her school halls too loud after the quiet clarity of purpose she'd felt digging trenches with Michael and the village kids. Everyone seemed to expect something from her now, but no one could name it. Teachers gave her space, but stared a beat too long. Classmates watched her like she might float or explode at any moment. Emma Carter, the girl who went to Africa. The girl who fixed a village. The girl who, what, exactly? One afternoon, in the middle of social studies, Mr. Keller asked the class, "What's a problem in your community you'd like to fix?" A boy from the back raised his hand and said, "Can we just have Emma do it?" Laughter followed. Emma forced a smile. But something in her chest pinched. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even embarrassment. It was a deep, twisting discomfort, being put on a pedestal when all she wanted was to keep building, keep learning, keep doing. After class, she stayed behind. Mr. Keller looked up from his desk. "Everything okay?" Emma hesitated. Then, "What if I peaked at 12? He blinked. "Excuse me? I mean, what if that was the big thing? Barani. Harvard. The problem. The solution. What if that was it?" Mr. Keller leaned back in his chair and studied her the way a craftsman studies a rare piece of metal, noticing the strength and the strain lines. "Emma, can I tell you something?" She nodded. "Real greatness doesn't peak. It evolves. It stretches. But only if you stop trying to chase the high of one perfect moment and start committing to the long haul." Emma blinked. "Look, what you did in Barani," he continued. "That was incredible. But the world doesn't need more firework geniuses. It needs people who show up, every day, even when the camera's off. Especially when the camera's off." That night, she opened a blank page in her journal and wrote. "Build quietly. Grow constantly. Impact deeply." Then she drew the Barani water flow system from memory. And beside it, she sketched a new diagram. This time, it was something else. A vertical hydroponic system that could be installed in small urban spaces. Designed for neighborhoods with food deserts. Inspired by the empty grocery lot 2 blocks from her school. Because she'd seen now, how access, or the lack of it, shaped lives. Barani had changed her. Not into someone new. But into someone more. Still, the whispers hadn't stopped. Online, the comments grew again. Not cruel this time. Just, relentless. When's her TED Talk? Why hasn't she solved American water issues? She should run for office at this point. It was meant to be praise. But to Emma, it felt like pressure dressed up in admiration. One afternoon, she came home to find her mom sitting at the kitchen table, phone in hand, face tight. "You need to see this," she said, and handed her the screen. A blog post. Viral. Headline in bold. "The Emma Carter Effect, Is Too Much Genius Too Early a Danger?" The article questioned the ethics of putting children into real-world responsibility roles. It quoted an anonymous expert who said, "It's concerning when young minds are propelled into adult spaces before their sense of identity is fully formed." Emma stared at the words. The walls closed in for a second. Her mom reached out, taking her hand. "You are not a headline," she said. "You're not an experiment. You're a person. A kid, yes. But also someone who did something real and brave and hard." Emma squeezed her eyes shut. "I don't want to be perfect," she whispered. "You don't have to be. I just want to help. Build. Fix things that matter. I'm not trying to be anyone's symbol." Her mom smiled, sad and proud all at once. Then don't be. Just be Emma. The rest will sort itself out. That night, she reopened the hydroponic diagram. She added notes. Measurements. Material costs. She didn't post about it. Didn't share it. Just worked. Quietly. With purpose. And for the first time since Barani, she felt steady again. The kind of steady that doesn't need applause. The kind that endures. Because Emma had begun to understand something no article could explain. Greatness wasn't about the spotlight. It was about showing up. Even in the dark, and building the light yourself. Spring crept into Chicago like a secret. One day the trees were bare, the next they whispered green through the wind. Emma sat on the curb outside her house, a half-used roll of graph paper spread across her knees. Her fingers were smudged with pencil. Her socks were dirty from pacing barefoot across the driveway. The world was waking up again, and so was she. The design for the vertical hydroponic system was coming together. Quietly. She hadn't told anyone outside her mom and Jake. It wasn't for headlines or interviews or social posts. This one was for the alley 2 blocks over, where a grocery store used to be and where now there was only broken glass, overgrown weeds, and a shopping cart missing a wheel. Emma had seen it every day on the way to school. The empty space where food should have been. Where families used to buy fruit, eggs, milk. Now, the nearest grocery was 4 bus stops away. And the buses weren't always on time. Or running. Or safe. She didn't call it a project. She didn't even call it a solution. She just called it next. Jake was the first to see the full model. He came over one Saturday with a backpack full of snacks and a comic book he knew Emma would pretend not to like. "What is that thing?" he asked, eyeing the PVC frame propped against her garage wall. Emma smiled faintly. "It's food. Growing up." She showed him how the water would cycle through vertically stacked containers. How the plants would root in a recycled medium instead of soil. How the entire thing could run off a battery charged by a solar panel no bigger than a pizza box. And how it could fit inside an alley no wider than a sedan. "You're gonna build this?" he asked, eyes wide. Emma nodded. "Right here. I already checked the property with the city. It's technically public land. Nobody owns it. And there's a community center 2 blocks down that said they'd help maintain it." Jake just stared at her. "You really don't sleep, do you?" Emma grinned. That night, they walked to the abandoned lot. Emma held a flashlight while Jake helped stake out rough measurements with some string and garden markers. The lot was quiet. Empty. Except it wasn't. It buzzed with possibility, like the air before a thunderstorm. Emma stood in the middle of it, boots crunching over broken glass, and imagined kids picking lettuce and basil and strawberries from rows of green instead of choosing between canned corn and expired ramen. She didn't need Harvard for this. She just needed now. The next few weeks were a flurry of visits to the hardware store, digging through YouTube tutorials, late-night texts with Michael and Barney asking about water pump calibration. Her mom helped where she could, driving her around, holding pipes while Emma tightened connections. Sometimes, her mom would just sit nearby with a thermos of tea, not saying much, just being there. That was enough. The attention from Barney had finally quieted. A few interviews had trickled in, but Emma had learned to say no when something didn't feel right. She didn't need to be everywhere. She just needed to be here. Still, not everyone was thrilled with her latest idea. At a neighborhood committee meeting, an older woman narrowed her eyes at Emma's blueprint presentation. "So let me get this straight. A 12-year-old wants to put a science experiment in an alley behind my apartment?" Emma kept her voice steady. "It's not an experiment. It's a pilot. And it grows up to 80 pounds of produce a month. Year-round. A man beside her scoffed. And who's going to pick it? Water it? Keep kids from messing it up. Emma held her ground. The community center signed on. And I'm working with a local urban farming nonprofit to train volunteers. I've got backup. There was a long pause. Then, from the back, a quiet voice said, I'd help. Everyone turned. It was a teenage girl, maybe 16, wearing a hoodie and worn sneakers. She looked nervous but steady. I live in that building, she said. My grandma's diabetic. If this thing means I don't have to take 3 buses to buy spinach, I'm in. More silence. Then, a nod from the chairperson. Let's give it a trial. 1 season. Emma didn't smile until she got home and closed her bedroom door. Then she flopped on the bed and laughed into her pillow, part victory, part disbelief, part exhaustion. The next morning, she was back in the alley. Measuring. Hammering. Installing drip lines and support beams. Kids wandered by and asked questions. Adults peeked from windows. Someone left a small bag of tomato seeds at the edge of the fence. No note. Just seeds. And slowly, day by day, something happened. Green appeared. Tiny sprouts. Then leaves. Then full blooms. By week 5, Emma stood in the alley surrounded by vertical towers of edible life. It didn't look like much from a distance. But up close, it was everything. Kids came after school with plastic tubs. A woman brought her toddler to pick mint for tea. A middle schooler offered to repaint the chain-link fence to keep it looking fresh. Emma didn't run the system. The community did. She just helped build it. She stood beside Jake one evening, watching the sun dip low over the alley. You know, he said, I think this is cooler than Harvard. Emma looked at him. Me too. And somewhere deep inside, she understood something even the judges hadn't taught her. Innovation wasn't about the biggest idea. It was about the right idea, at the right moment, in the right hands. It wasn't about being impressive. It was about being useful. And as the wind carried the scent of basil and strawberries through that once-forgotten alley, Emma Carter smiled, not because she was recognized, but because she had recognized the need. And chosen to show up. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The early morning sun streamed through Emma's bedroom window as she sketched ideas for expanding the hydroponic system. Her pencil danced over the paper, tracing new lines and angles with the kind of energy only fresh ideas could fuel. But beneath her excitement lurked a familiar unease. Success was no longer a quiet companion, it was starting to demand more. Word about the urban farm project was spreading. The local news caught wind and came to film one afternoon, turning the one secret alley into a stage. Cameras zoomed in on the green towers, and neighbors smiled shyly into the lens. Emma stood beside Jake, feeling proud yet oddly exposed. At school, whispers turned into conversations. Some classmates were impressed, others skeptical. But what surprised Emma most was the sudden pushback from some community members. At the next neighborhood meeting, the air was thick with tension. An older man stood, his voice gravelly and sharp. This is good and all, but what about the rats? The trash? This alley has been a problem for years, and now you're telling me this will fix it? His eyes scanned the room, daring anyone to disagree. Emma felt her stomach tighten. She had prepared for questions, but not for outright doubt. She took a breath and answered, the hydroponic towers actually help reduce pests by eliminating open soil, which attracts rodents. Plus, the community center has organized regular cleanups to keep the space safe and welcoming. The man shook his head. You're a smart kid, but this sounds like wishful thinking. Jake stepped forward. We're not just hoping here. We're doing it. Every week, we see more plants growing, more neighbors coming together. A woman from the back chimed in, I live next door, and I've noticed fewer rats since this started. It's cleaner. It's better. The room softened, but the undercurrent of doubt lingered. Emma realized that change, even when positive, often came wrapped in skepticism. Back at home, she found herself juggling schoolwork, the urban farm, and the growing expectations from adults who now saw her as a community leader. The pressure mounted, and with it came sleepless nights and moments of self-doubt. One evening, after a long day of hauling supplies and coordinating volunteers, Emma collapsed onto her bed. Her journal lay open, empty except for the words she had written weeks before: build quietly, grow constantly, impact deeply. But now, those words felt heavier than ever. Was she truly ready for this? Could she handle the weight of everyone's hopes? As she stared at the ceiling, her phone buzzed with a message from Michael. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being persistent. Emma smiled through her fatigue. The message was simple but powerful, a lifeline from a friend halfway across the world. She closed her eyes and made a silent promise to herself, to keep going, no matter what. The next morning, armed with renewed determination, Emma returned to the alley. She greeted the volunteers with a smile and rolled up her sleeves. Together, they worked to expand the project, planting new crops and reinforcing the towers. Amid the challenges and doubts, Emma discovered a truth that would stay with her forever: real change was messy and slow, but it was also worth every struggle. And as the green leaves reached for the sun, so did Emma's hope, steadier, stronger, and ready to face whatever came next. Spring was in full bloom when the first real challenge hit Emma's project. The hydroponic towers stood tall, lush with leafy greens and ripe tomatoes, but beneath the surface, trouble was quietly brewing. It started with a leak. A small drip from a joint in the piping system that Emma had overlooked. At first, it seemed harmless, a minor nuisance, but water began pooling at the base of the towers, saturating the ground and attracting pests. Then came the storm. A heavy rainstorm swept through Chicago overnight, pounding the city with relentless sheets of water. By morning, the alley was a muddy mess. The hydroponic system, usually so steady and precise, was overwhelmed. Some of the plants wilted under the excess moisture, and a few of the wooden supports cracked from the strain. Emma received the first texts early that day. Volunteers reported the damage. She felt her chest tighten as she imagined the green oasis turning into a soggy ruin. Arriving at the site, Emma's heart sank. The alley was a chaos of fallen branches, scattered debris, and dripping pipes. The plants looked battered, their leaves heavy and limp. She knelt beside a drooping tomato vine and traced her fingers along its stem. It felt fragile, yet it was still alive. For a moment, Emma's vision wavered. Months of work, community hope, and her own dreams seemed to be slipping through her fingers like the muddy water pooling at her feet. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from her mom. "Emma, honey, don't be discouraged," her mom said softly. "Sometimes setbacks aren't failures. They're lessons." Emma swallowed hard. "I just don't know if I can fix this. What if I'm not the person they think I am?" Her mom's voice was steady. "You are more than enough. Remember why you started. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up." The words echoed in Emma's mind as she looked around the battered garden. Jake arrived shortly after, sleeves rolled up, eyes full of determination. "We'll fix this," he said. "Together." And that's exactly what they did. For days, Emma and the volunteers worked tirelessly. They repaired the pipes, replaced broken supports, and replanted what they could salvage. Each new seed was a promise, a sign that growth was possible even after storms. Slowly, the garden began to heal. And with it, so did Emma's spirit. The setback became a turning point, a reminder that real progress was built not on flawless beginnings, but on resilience. By the time summer arrived, the alley was bursting with color again, vibrant and alive. Emma stood among the greenery, dirt under her nails and a smile breaking through. She realized then that the greatest challenge wasn't building something new. It was having the courage to rebuild after it fell apart. Summer light poured into Emma's room as she sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by notebooks, diagrams, and a laptop humming softly. The hydroponic garden had bounced back from the storm, greener and stronger, but Emma felt a different kind of pressure settling in, one that didn't come from weather or hardware, but from inside herself. The world was watching now. News outlets, local politicians, even some national organizations had started reaching out. Suddenly, Emma was no longer just a kid with a good idea, she was a symbol of hope, resilience, and possibility. And that made the weight of expectation heavier than she'd ever imagined. At school, the whispers grew louder, some filled with admiration, others tinged with envy. She felt eyes on her in the hallways and in the cafeteria, sometimes kind, sometimes cold. Friends tried to be supportive, but Emma noticed subtle shifts, small distances growing between them. Late one night, Emma sat by her bedroom window, staring out at the city lights, the sounds of distant traffic a soft murmur beneath her thoughts. Doubt whispered in her mind like a persistent shadow. Was she really capable? Could she keep this going? What if the garden failed again? What if the people who believed in her turned away? She thought of the letter from Harvard, the challenge that had started it all, and wondered if she was still the same girl who had answered it with boldness and hope. The next morning, Emma's mom found her sitting quietly at the kitchen table, eyes unfocused. "Hey, kiddo," her mom said gently, sliding a warm mug across the table. "You seem distant." Emma sighed. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. Everyone expects so much. What if I'm not enough?" Her mom reached across, taking Emma's hand. "Sweetheart, being enough isn't about never failing. It's about trying even when you're scared. You don't have to carry it all alone." Those words settled like balm. Emma nodded, feeling the weight lift just a little. That afternoon, she met with the community center volunteers. Together, they planned new ways to involve neighbors, organize workshops, and expand the garden's reach. Step by step, Emma reminded herself that progress wasn't a straight line. She wasn't just growing plants in that alley, she was growing strength within herself. And as summer deepened, so did Emma's resolve, to face doubt, embrace imperfection, and keep pushing forward, no matter what. The first whispers of fall arrived with a crispness in the air that seemed to sharpen Emma's focus. The hydroponic garden, once just a dream in a dusty alley, had become a vibrant hub where neighbors gathered, exchanged stories, and shared hope. Yet despite the outward success, Emma felt the quiet tension of an approaching turning point gnawing at her. One afternoon, as she watered the plants with practiced care, her phone buzzed relentlessly in her pocket. It was a call from the neighborhood committee chairperson, an invitation that Emma both anticipated and dreaded. She wiped her hands on her jeans and stepped into the shade of a nearby maple tree, the leaves casting dappled patterns on the cracked pavement. "Emma," the woman's voice was measured but firm, "we need to talk about the project's future." Emma's heart fluttered uneasily. She had known this moment would come. The committee was growing impatient for concrete results and sustainability plans. Funding was tight, and the community's support, while strong, wasn't unanimous. Some still doubted that a 12-year-old could carry the weight of this initiative. "I'm listening," Emma said, steady despite the storm gathering inside her. "We're concerned about maintenance. The community center can't commit indefinitely. We need a clear plan, someone to take ownership, long-term. And the city wants to see measurable impact." Emma nodded slowly. She had already thought about this. The success of the garden was only the beginning, its future depended on more than enthusiasm. "I understand," she replied. "I've been working on partnerships with local nonprofits and schools. I want to create an education program where students learn to manage the garden themselves. It's about building community leaders, not just plants. There was a pause, then a softer tone. That sounds promising. But you know this will require time and resources. Are you prepared for that? Emma swallowed the lump rising in her throat. The truth was, she didn't have all the answers. But what she did have was determination and a belief that this garden was bigger than herself. I'm ready to do whatever it takes, she said. After the call ended, Emma walked back to the garden, her eyes tracing the rows of green that swayed gently in the breeze. The summer storms and doubts had left scars, but here was proof that growth was possible. She knelt beside a tomato plant heavy with fruit, brushing her fingers along its vine as if seeking reassurance. That night, in the quiet of her room, Emma sat at her desk and opened her journal. She wrote about the challenge ahead, the pressure to prove herself not just to the committee but to everyone watching. She wrote about the weight of expectation and the fear of failing those who believed in her. But then she wrote about hope. About how every seed planted was a promise to herself and her community. About how the lessons from storms, both literal and figurative, had taught her resilience. She realized that this journey was not just about a hydroponic garden or winning a challenge from Harvard. It was about growing into the person she was meant to be. Emma's eyes closed briefly as she took a deep breath, feeling a quiet strength settle within her. Tomorrow, the real work would continue. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment to simply believe. The crisp air of early fall wrapped around Emma as she walked back to the alley garden, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot blending with the low murmur of neighbors chatting nearby. The sun was dipping behind the tall city buildings, casting long shadows over the green towers she had nurtured for months. This wasn't just a patch of plants anymore, it was a symbol, a testament to what one determined girl could spark. Yet beneath that sense of accomplishment, a new tension had begun to weave itself into Emma's thoughts. The neighborhood committee's recent call echoed in her mind, their cautious questions about sustainability and long-term leadership pressing like a weight she hadn't fully felt before. She stopped near the tallest hydroponic tower, where clusters of ripe tomatoes hung heavy. She reached out and gently touched a vine, her fingers tracing the smooth curves of the fruit, warm from the fading sun. The plants looked healthy, vibrant, full of life, but Emma knew that keeping them thriving meant more than watering and sunlight. It required people willing to invest time, effort, and care when her own hands weren't around. This realization stirred a restlessness deep inside her. What would happen when she could no longer be here every day? Would the garden fade back into the shadows it had once occupied? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of laughter and footsteps approaching. Jake appeared around the corner, carrying a box filled with fresh seeds and new equipment for the irrigation system. His face was bright, full of the kind of energy that had once drawn her in and kept her moving forward. "Hey, Emma," he said, setting the box down beside the garden. "Looks like you've been thinking hard." Emma smiled, grateful for the familiar presence. "Yeah, I have. The committee wants a plan. Something that lasts beyond us." Jake nodded, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Sounds like it's time to build a team." Together, they began to talk through ideas, how to bring local schools into the project, setting up workshops where kids could learn about hydroponics and sustainable gardening, training volunteers to handle maintenance, and involving city officials to secure funding and support. It was a big plan, one that stretched far beyond what Emma had imagined when she first answered that letter from Harvard. But the more they talked, the more she felt the spark of hope kindle again. Over the next few weeks, Emma's world expanded beyond the alley. She visited the community center regularly, meeting with organizers and local educators to outline the curriculum she wanted to create. The process was challenging, navigating schedules, balancing schoolwork, and managing the garden demanded more hours than she had in a day. But with every new partnership formed, Emma felt a growing confidence. The garden was becoming a movement, a shared mission. One afternoon, as she sat in a classroom filled with eager middle schoolers, explaining how nutrients circulated through the hydroponic towers, a shy boy raised his hand. "Could we start a garden at our school?" he asked. The question made Emma's heart swell. That was exactly the kind of impact she hoped for. A ripple spreading wider and wider. Back at the alley, the community gatherings grew more frequent. Neighbors who once watched from afar now showed up with tools and smiles, sharing stories and laughter beneath the city lights. Emma realized that the garden wasn't just about food, it was about connection, about healing a neighborhood one plant, one person at a time. But with growth came new challenges. A city inspector visited to review the site and voiced concerns about safety and regulations. Emma sat through meetings with officials who asked tough questions about liability and upkeep. There were nights when the doubts crept back in, whispering that maybe she had taken on too much. The pressure to deliver measurable results was real, and sometimes it felt like the entire project could unravel at any moment. During one particularly stressful evening, Emma found herself alone in the garden as the sun set behind the skyline. The towers cast long shadows, and the cool breeze whispered through the leaves. She knelt beside a struggling lettuce plant, its edges browning despite her care. The sight stung her like a failure. For a moment, the weight of responsibility threatened to crush her spirit. Then her phone buzzed, a message from Michael, her mentor at Harvard, who had been following her progress from afar. "Remember, Emma," it read, "every great leader faces setbacks. It's how you respond that defines you." Those words echoed louder than the evening wind. Emma wiped her tears and stood up, feeling a renewed strength pulse through her veins. She wasn't alone. She had a team, a community, and a purpose. The next day, she gathered her volunteers for a meeting. "We're going to face obstacles," she told them honestly. "But together, we'll find solutions. This garden is bigger than any one of us. It belongs to all of us." Inspired by her determination, the group brainstormed ways to address the inspector's concerns, improve safety measures, and secure additional funding. Plans were made to apply for grants and organize fundraising events. The community's investment was growing, not just in the garden, but in Emma herself. As autumn deepened, the hydroponic garden flourished against the backdrop of amber leaves and cool breezes. Emma often found herself standing in the alley at dusk, watching families gather to harvest fresh vegetables or share meals under strings of fairy lights. These moments reminded her of why she had started this journey, to plant seeds of hope in a place that had long been overlooked. One evening, as she closed the garden for the night, Emma caught sight of her reflection in a puddle. The girl staring back was no longer the unsure child who had nervously opened a letter from Harvard months ago. She was stronger, wiser, and brimming with a quiet confidence born of struggle and perseverance. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, but she also knew that every challenge was an opportunity, to learn, to grow, and to inspire others. In that moment, Emma made a promise, not just to herself, but to everyone who believed in her. She would keep pushing forward, no matter what obstacles arose. Because this garden, this community, and this dream were worth fighting for. And in the quiet glow of the streetlights, surrounded by the fruits of her labor, Emma felt a powerful truth settle deep inside her heart: real change doesn't come from waiting for perfect conditions. It comes from brave souls who dare to start, to stumble, and to rise again, one step at a time. Winter crept quietly over the city, blanketing the alley garden with frost and softening the edges of Emma's world. The vibrant greens of summer were replaced by dormant branches and empty towers, but the garden's heartbeat pulsed steadily beneath the surface, waiting for the warmth to return. Emma wrapped her scarf tight around her neck, the chill biting but unable to numb the fire growing inside her. This season, she realized, was a test unlike any she had faced before, one of patience, endurance, and vision beyond what was visible. The hustle of the community center slowed during the cold months. Fewer volunteers came by, and the once bustling workshop rooms echoed with quiet. Yet Emma refused to let the stillness settle into despair. She spent evenings poring over books about sustainable agriculture and city planning, sketching out designs for the next phase of the project. Her fingers ached from pages turned late into the night, but her mind was electric, alive with possibilities. A knock at the door one frosty evening startled her from her work. It was Mrs. Patel, her neighbor and longtime supporter, holding a steaming cup of tea. "You work too hard, Emma," she said with a warm smile. "Even the strongest roots need time to rest." Emma smiled back, grateful for the kindness. "I know. But I want to make sure this garden can survive whatever comes next." Together, they sat by the window, watching snowflakes drift lazily past the streetlights. It was a moment of quiet reflection, one that reminded Emma how far she had come and how far there was still to go. The winter months became a season of preparation. Emma organized planning meetings to map out an educational program for spring, one that would bring schoolchildren into the garden and teach them not just about plants, but about community and responsibility. She reached out to local businesses for donations of supplies and resources, learning the art of negotiation and persistence. Each phone call, each email, was a building block toward a future she was determined to shape. But the hardest test was yet to come. One cold afternoon, Emma received an email from Harvard. The tone was formal but clear. The university wanted to review her project's progress and assess whether she was ready to present her work at an upcoming conference. The opportunity was incredible, a chance to stand on a national stage and share her vision, but it came with the crushing weight of expectation. Emma felt the old familiar tangle of excitement and fear knotting in her stomach. Could she do it? Was she ready to represent not just her garden, but her community, her dreams, and herself? That night, she confided in her mom. "What if I mess up? What if they expect too much?" Her mom smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. "Remember the storm, the leak, all those times you thought you couldn't fix it. But you did. This is just another challenge. And you're stronger than you think." Emma let those words settle deep inside her. Over the next weeks, she poured herself into preparation, refining her presentation, rehearsing her speech, and anticipating tough questions. Each practice was a small victory, a reminder that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. Finally, the day of the conference arrived. Emma stood backstage, heart pounding beneath her jacket, the bright lights of the auditorium filtering through the curtain. She could hear the murmur of the crowd, the shuffle of papers, the hum of anticipation. This was the moment she had worked for, a chance to show the world that a 12-year-old girl with a dream could make a difference. When her name was called, Emma stepped onto the stage, feeling the warmth of the spotlight wash over her. She took a deep breath, looked out at the sea of faces, and began to speak. Her voice was steady, clear, and filled with the passion that had carried her through months of doubt and struggle. She told the story of the alley garden, how it had started as a small idea sparked by a letter, how it had faced storms both literal and figurative, and how it had grown into a beacon of hope for a community. She shared the challenges, the setbacks, and the moments of triumph that had shaped her journey. And she spoke of the future, a vision of education, sustainability, and empowerment that reached far beyond her own neighborhood. As Emma finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in applause. Faces in the crowd shone with admiration, some eyes glistening with tears. For a moment, Emma felt something swell inside her, a blend of relief, pride, and an overwhelming sense of belonging. Backstage, Michael approached with a smile that said everything she needed to hear. "You left the room speechless," he said simply. Emma smiled, the weight lifting from her shoulders. This wasn't the end, she knew, but a new beginning. And as the winter light faded into the promise of spring, Emma felt ready to grow even more, to face whatever challenges lay ahead with the same fierce hope that had brought her this far. The applause from the conference still echoed in Emma's ears long after she left the stage. The memory of the standing ovation, the faces filled with respect and awe, felt almost unreal. But the glow of that moment quickly gave way to a new reality, the pressure to prove that her success wasn't a one-time spark, but the beginning of something sustainable. Emma returned home to a city wrapped in the tentative thaw of early spring, where the alley garden was waking from its winter slumber, and so was she. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Emma's presentation had opened doors, local news outlets wanted interviews, community leaders invited her to speak at events, and schools expressed interest in partnering to expand the hydroponic project. At first, it was exhilarating. People who had once doubted now watched eagerly, ready to support her vision. Yet beneath the excitement, Emma felt the heavy pulse of responsibility. This wasn't just about her dream anymore, it was about delivering on promises to an entire network of supporters. One afternoon, as she stood beside the newly installed vertical towers humming with fresh seedlings, Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Jake. "Can we meet? Got some concerns to share." His words were brief but carried the weight of urgency. Emma hurried to the community center, where Jake was waiting, his expression serious. "I've been talking to some of the volunteers," he began. "They're worried the project is moving too fast. Some feel overwhelmed and unsure if they can keep up." Emma sighed, understanding immediately. What had started as a passionate group of neighbors was now a larger team with varying skills, availability, and expectations. The excitement was real, but so was the risk of burnout and fragmentation. "We need to slow down, regroup," Emma said thoughtfully. "Make sure everyone feels supported and heard. This has to be a team effort, not just a race." Over the next days, Emma worked closely with Jake and other volunteers to create a more structured plan that balanced ambition with sustainability. They organized smaller, manageable tasks and offered training sessions to build confidence. Emma realized that leadership wasn't just about vision, it was about empathy, listening, and adapting. Meanwhile, Emma's school life was demanding in its own way. Balancing classes, homework, and her expanding responsibilities was exhausting. Sometimes she arrived home too tired to tend the garden herself, relying on her team to fill the gaps. It was a lesson in trust and delegation, hard for a girl used to doing everything herself. One rainy evening, as Emma sat at her kitchen table surrounded by notes and schedules, her mother placed a warm cup of tea beside her. "You don't have to carry this alone, Emma. Let others in. That's how we grow." Emma nodded, knowing her mom was right. She called a meeting with her core volunteers the very next day. "This garden belongs to all of us," she told them. "We succeed together or not at all. Let's be honest about what's working and what isn't." That openness sparked a new energy in the group. People shared their struggles and ideas freely. They started rotating responsibilities, creating backup plans, and celebrating small victories. Emma watched as the project transformed, not just a garden, but a community woven tighter by shared purpose. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the alley and the scent of fresh basil filled the air, Emma noticed a young girl watching from across the street. She was about Emma's age, shy and curious, clutching a notebook filled with sketches. Emma waved her over, and soon the girl was helping water plants, asking questions about the hydroponic system. Her name was Lily, and she dreamed of starting a garden at her own school. Emma saw herself in Lily. The same spark, the same hunger to make a difference. She took the girl under her wing, teaching her not just about plants, but about patience, resilience, and hope. The garden continued to grow, not just in size but in meaning. It became a classroom, a refuge, and a symbol of what could happen when a community believed in itself. Emma's challenge from Harvard had become a catalyst for transformation, proving that age was no barrier to impact. But just as the garden blossomed, an unexpected threat loomed. One morning, Emma arrived to find the alley cordoned off by city officials. A construction project was planned nearby, an expansion that threatened to demolish the garden's very foundation. The news hit Emma like a cold wave. All their hard work, their dreams, faced erasure. Determined not to let years of effort be swept away, Emma rallied her team. They organized petitions, spoke at city council meetings, and gathered support from neighbors and media alike. The fight was fierce and exhausting, but Emma's voice, clear, passionate, unwavering, became the rallying cry. In the tense days that followed, the community came together like never before. Their unity, their stories, and their hope made city leaders listen. A compromise was reached: the garden would remain, integrated into the new development as a green space open to all. Standing once again amidst the thriving towers, Emma felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not just for the victory, but for the journey that had brought her here. The garden was no longer just her project, it was a living testament to resilience, community, and the power of a single determined girl who refused to give up. As spring gave way to summer, Emma watched Lily and other young volunteers tending the plants, their faces bright with possibility. She knew challenges would come again, life was never without them, but this garden, and the people who cared for it, had proven that hope could grow in even the hardest soil. And Emma? She was ready to keep planting seeds, for change, for growth, for the future. Summer arrived with a blaze of sunlight and promise, and the alley garden flourished under Emma's careful watch. The vibrant green walls now stretched higher, their hydroponic towers brimming with fresh herbs, tomatoes, and lettuce, while blossoms swayed gently in the warm breeze. But the garden was more than just plants, it was a living emblem of the community's spirit, a testament to what a group of determined people could build when they refused to give up. Emma's days had grown busier than ever, balancing school, the garden, and her new role as a mentor. She found herself speaking not just to neighbors but to city planners, teachers, and even college students interested in urban sustainability. The Harvard Challenge that had once seemed so daunting was now a springboard launching her into new spheres of influence she hadn't imagined. One afternoon, as she walked through the garden with Lily, Emma noticed something different. A group of younger kids had gathered by the entrance, hesitant but curious. Their eyes widened at the lush greenery, their fingers twitching to touch the leaves and smell the herbs. Emma's heart swelled with hope. This was exactly why she had fought so hard. So the next generation could see that change was possible, that they could grow something beautiful from concrete and struggle. Emma invited them inside, and soon the kids were eagerly helping water, plant, and learn about the cycles of life. She showed them how to set up simple hydroponic trays, explaining that even small actions could ripple out into something big. The children's laughter and enthusiasm were like music, blending with the buzz of bees and rustling leaves. Yet, amid the joy, Emma felt a quiet restlessness. There was so much more to do, more neighborhoods to reach, more ideas to try. The garden was thriving, but it was just one seed in a vast field of possibilities. She began sketching plans for an outreach program, a mobile hydroponic classroom that could travel across the city, bringing lessons and hope to places without green spaces. Her vision was ambitious, and not everyone shared her confidence. At a city youth forum, a council member voiced skepticism. How can a 12-year-old hope to change the fabric of a city? These are big problems that need big solutions. Emma's response was calm but firm. Every big change starts with a small idea. And every person, no matter their age, has the power to make a difference. That night, as she lay in bed, Emma reflected on how far she had come, from the girl who once doubted herself to a young leader inspiring others. She remembered her mother's words about roots and resilience, understanding now that growth was not just about strength, but about bending without breaking, adapting without losing heart. The following weeks brought a surge of new opportunities. Emma's project caught the attention of a local environmental nonprofit that offered funding and support to launch the mobile classroom. She and Lily worked tirelessly to design the curriculum and retrofit a small van with shelves of plants and interactive tools. It was exhausting, but exhilarating, a new frontier where Emma's ideas could bloom beyond the garden walls. But with growth came new challenges. Managing a larger project meant juggling more responsibilities and facing unforeseen setbacks. There were technical glitches with the mobile setup, scheduling conflicts with schools, and moments when Emma felt stretched too thin. Late nights and early mornings blurred together as she tried to keep everything on track. One particularly difficult evening, after a long day of troubleshooting, Emma sat alone in the empty garden. The cool air wrapped around her, and for the first time in a while, the weight of everything pressed heavily on her shoulders. Doubts crept in. Was she taking on too much? Could she really make a lasting impact? In that quiet moment, a soft voice called out. It was Lily, holding a small bouquet of fresh basil and mint. You don't have to do it all by yourself, Emma. We're here. We're a team. Emma smiled, gratitude blooming inside her. She realized that leadership wasn't about being perfect or doing everything alone, it was about building a community strong enough to stand together. Reinvigorated, Emma pushed forward. The mobile classroom launched with a joyous event that drew families, teachers, and local officials. Watching children's eyes light up as they learned about sustainable growing, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. This was more than a project. It was a movement, a promise that even the smallest voices could grow loud and clear. As summer deepened, Emma received an unexpected invitation, a National Youth Summit on Climate Action. The event promised a gathering of bright minds and passionate leaders, an opportunity to share her story on an even bigger stage. Preparing for the summit, Emma felt a familiar flutter of nerves, but also a steadying confidence. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but the journey had taught her resilience, the value of community, and the power of hope. Stepping onto the stage at the summit, surrounded by peers and mentors from across the country, Emma spoke with the clarity and passion that had become her hallmark. She shared not just her successes, but her struggles, the fears, the doubts, and the moments when she almost gave up. Her story resonated deeply, reminding everyone that change was possible, no matter how daunting the challenge. The room erupted in applause, and Emma knew this was just the beginning. The garden, the mobile classroom, the community, they were threads in a larger tapestry of hope and action. As she looked out over the crowd, Emma's thoughts drifted back to that first letter from Harvard, the seed that had sparked it all. She realized that sometimes, the most unexpected challenges could lead to the most extraordinary journeys. And Emma was ready to keep growing, no matter where the road took her next. The buzz from the National Youth Summit still hummed in Emma's mind days after she returned home. The energy of hundreds of young changemakers, each with their own story and fire to make a difference, had ignited something deeper within her. It wasn't just about her alley garden anymore. It was about being part of a movement, one where her small seeds could help grow a forest of change. Back in her neighborhood, the familiar sights of the alley garden welcomed her with open arms. The hydroponic towers reached skyward, leaves glistening with fresh dew in the morning sun. Emma took a deep breath, feeling the earthiness mixed with hope fill her lungs. It was grounding, a reminder that growth was both a personal journey and a community effort. Emma's mind was already racing ahead. Inspired by stories at the summit, she imagined expanding the mobile classroom into a full outreach program across the city's schools and community centers. But she knew the path wouldn't be easy. Scaling up meant more resources, more coordination, and far more obstacles. The first challenge came unexpectedly. A city budget cut threatened the environmental grants that funded many of their upcoming projects. Emma's team scrambled to adjust plans, searching for new donors and creative ways to stretch every dollar. It was a harsh reminder that passion alone couldn't fuel a movement, practical support was essential. But Emma refused to be discouraged. She held a community fundraiser, organizing volunteers to bake, craft, and perform at a local fair. The event was a small miracle. Neighbors who barely knew each other came together, sharing food, stories, and laughter. The money raised was modest, but the spirit was enormous, reminding Emma that grassroots power was real and alive. One afternoon, as Emma reviewed their progress in the garden's modest office, Michael stopped by with a hopeful smile. "I heard about the fundraiser. You did great." Emma returned the smile, but admitted, "It's not enough. We need a bigger plan to secure funding long-term." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "What about partnering with local businesses? Sometimes they're looking to give back, especially if you can show the impact." That suggestion sparked a new idea. Emma and Lily drafted proposals and reached out to small businesses, cafes, bookstores, even a nearby grocery store, that valued sustainability. To their surprise, many were eager to join in, offering sponsorships, volunteer hours, and supplies. With this network growing, Emma realized she had stumbled onto something critical, building a community of supporters beyond just volunteers and neighbors, but including businesses and city leaders. It was a web of relationships, each thread strengthening the next. However, with growth came complexity. Coordinating schedules, balancing expectations, and managing diverse stakeholders began to wear on Emma. The weight of leadership pressed heavier, and some nights she lay awake wondering if she was stretching herself too thin. Her schoolwork also demanded attention, with exams looming and projects piling up. Emma's teachers noticed her occasional tiredness but were supportive, recognizing the importance of her work beyond the classroom. One rainy afternoon, as Emma sat at her desk surrounded by textbooks and garden plans, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Harvard, a request to participate in a panel discussion on youth innovation later that year. The honor was tremendous, but the pressure mounted. That night, Emma confided in her mom, voicing her fears of failure and overwhelm. "What if I'm not ready? What if I let everyone down?" Her mom hugged her close, steady and warm. "You don't have to do it all perfectly, Emma. What matters is your heart and your courage to keep trying. That's what changes the world." Those words became a mantra. Emma started delegating more, trusting her growing team and learning to say no when necessary. She reminded herself that leadership was not about doing everything, but about inspiring others to step up. As summer waned, the garden became a beacon once again. School groups visited regularly, children's laughter echoing through the alley. Emma watched Lily lead a workshop, proud to see her young men growing into a leader in her own right. The panel discussion at Harvard came next. Emma stood among older students and innovators, sharing her story with a blend of humility and confidence. The questions were tough, the audience curious and challenging. Yet Emma's honesty and passion shone through, earning her not just applause, but respect. Returning home, Emma felt a new sense of purpose. The journey was far from over. The alley garden, the mobile classroom, the community, all were threads in a tapestry still being woven. And she was ready to keep weaving, stitch by stitch, dream by dream. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Emma stood in the garden surrounded by friends and family. The air was filled with the scent of fresh herbs and the warmth of shared accomplishment. She thought back to that first daunting letter from Harvard, the challenge that had seemed so immense, and smiled. What she had done, what they had all done together, had left more than a room speechless. It had left a legacy of hope, resilience, and the undeniable power of a single girl's vision. The gentle hum of the city evening settled over Emma's neighborhood, wrapping the alley garden in a quiet glow of fading sunlight and fresh earth. The garden had become a place not just for growing plants, but for cultivating dreams, friendships, and resilience. Emma stood at the center of it all, watching her vision ripple outward in ways she hadn't imagined. But beneath the surface, new challenges were stirring. The mobile classroom program, now fully underway, had sparked excitement and momentum across the city, but it demanded constant attention. Each day brought new invitations to schools, community events, and meetings, stretching Emma's time thinner than ever. Sometimes, she felt like she was running to keep pace with her own ambitions. One cool autumn afternoon, Emma sat with Lily in the garden's small shed, surrounded by soil bags and seedlings. Lily was busy sketching designs for a new hydroponic setup when Emma's phone buzzed with an urgent text. The message was from Principal Harris of their local middle school. "We need to talk. The school board is questioning funding for after-school programs, including the garden project." Emma's heart sank. The garden and mobile classroom were more than extracurricular activities, they were lifelines for many kids in their community, offering safe spaces, hands-on learning, and hope. Losing support could unravel months of progress. Determined not to let that happen, Emma scheduled a meeting with Principal Harris and several school board members. The room was filled with adults whose faces bore the fatigue and skepticism of bureaucratic challenges. Emma took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice steady despite the nerves swirling inside. She shared stories of students transformed by the garden's hands-on lessons, of shy kids finding confidence through nurturing plants, of community members rallying to protect green spaces in an often gray city. She explained how the mobile classroom brought science and sustainability directly to neighborhoods that lacked access. Emma's passion was palpable, and slowly, the room shifted. Questions turned into conversations, doubts softened into curiosity. After hours of dialogue, the board agreed to continue funding, on the condition that Emma and her team provide regular updates and demonstrate clear impact. It was a victory, but also a reminder that every step forward required perseverance and diplomacy. Back in the garden, the crisp air of early fall brought new colors and textures. Leaves turned golden, and the first frost threatened the tender seedlings. Emma worked alongside volunteers to prepare the plants for winter, teaching lessons on seasonal cycles and resilience. During one of these sessions, a reporter from a local newspaper stopped by, intrigued by the project's growth and Emma's story. The resulting article painted a vivid picture of the garden's role in the community and Emma's leadership. Overnight, emails and messages poured in, from parents, educators, and even scientists offering advice and support. The garden's ripple was becoming a wave. One evening, after a long day of planning and presentations, Emma sat alone beneath the garden's string lights, the soft glow illuminating her thoughtful face. The challenges were many, but so were the possibilities. She knew the journey ahead would demand more strength, more courage, and more faith. As she gazed upward, a shooting star streaked across the sky. Emma made a quiet wish, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in the power of change, no matter their age. The days grew shorter, and with winter approaching, Emma and her team began adapting their projects. They developed indoor hydroponic kits for classrooms, allowing students to keep learning even when outdoor gardens rested beneath snow. They launched virtual workshops, connecting communities across the city and beyond. Emma marveled at how technology and tradition could blend, expanding the reach of her dream. Amid all this, Emma's relationship with Lily deepened. The younger girl's curiosity and determination reminded Emma of herself, sparking a mentorship that was both rewarding and humbling. Together, they brainstormed new ideas, pushed boundaries, and shared moments of quiet reflection under the stars. One particularly cold evening, Lily asked, "Emma, do you ever get scared? Like, what if everything falls apart?" Emma smiled, her breath misting in the chilly air. "All the time. But fear is part of the journey. What matters is what you do with it, whether you let it stop you or use it to keep moving forward." Lily nodded thoughtfully, and Emma saw in her eyes the same fire that had driven her from the start. As the first snowflakes dusted the city, Emma felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path was winding and often steep, but it was hers to walk, alongside a community she loved. The Harvard Challenge that had once seemed a daunting mountain was now a foothill in a lifelong adventure. Emma knew there would be setbacks and triumphs yet to come. But whatever the future held, she was ready, rooted in hope, growing stronger with every step. Winter settled over the city with a quiet hush, frosting the alley garden in a delicate lace of ice and snow. Emma stood wrapped in a thick scarf, her breath visible in the crisp air as she checked the indoor hydroponic kits that had become the garden's new lifeline through the cold months. The plants inside thrived under the glow of grow lights, their leaves vivid against the gray world outside. This transition had been tough, but necessary, and Emma took pride in how her team adapted so quickly. It was proof that no challenge was too big if met with creativity and determination. The garden was more than a project now, it was a symbol. A symbol of resilience in a neighborhood too often overlooked, a beacon for young people learning that their voices mattered. Emma had grown into a leader who inspired others not just with her ideas but with her unwavering spirit. Yet beneath the surface of success, she felt the steady pull of exhaustion and the weight of expectations. Balancing school, her expanding environmental projects, family, and a social life that sometimes felt distant was a constant juggling act. There were nights when Emma lay awake, her mind swirling with ideas and worries, wondering if she was spreading herself too thin. But then she remembered the first day she had received that letter from Harvard, the moment that had launched this incredible journey. That letter was more than an invitation, it was a challenge to herself, a call to grow stronger and braver. On a particularly chilly evening, Emma attended a city council meeting where plans for new green spaces were being discussed. As she listened, she realized how far her vision had come. She was no longer just a student or a local advocate but a recognized voice in shaping the city's future. When it was her turn to speak, she shared stories from the alley garden, from the mobile classroom, and from the kids who found joy and purpose in growing something alive. Her words carried the weight of experience and hope. The council members responded with interest, some promising support, others posing difficult questions. Emma welcomed the challenge, knowing that progress often required patience, persistence, and the courage to keep pushing forward. That night, walking home under a canopy of stars, Emma felt a quiet satisfaction. She was planting seeds not just in soil, but in hearts and minds. Back in the garden's cozy indoor space, Emma met with Lily and a group of volunteers to plan the spring planting. The energy was electric, new ideas buzzed, plans expanded, and the community spirit blossomed even in the cold. Emma watched Lily, now confident and eager, guiding younger kids through planting techniques. It reminded her of her own early days, when uncertainty had given way to determination. "Do you think we'll ever get to Harvard?" Lily asked one afternoon, eyes bright with hope and a touch of awe. Emma smiled, the question pulling at her heart. "I think Harvard's just one part of the journey. What matters is what we do with the opportunities we have. And who we become along the way." Their conversation drifted to dreams and futures, and Emma felt the bittersweet truth of growing up, the balance between holding on to youthful hope and facing the responsibilities of tomorrow. Just as winter seemed endless, news arrived that lifted everyone's spirits. The city had approved funding for a new community garden initiative, inspired in part by Emma's projects and advocacy. The announcement was a victory not only for Emma and her team but for the neighborhood, a sign that their voices were heard and their work valued. Celebrations were humble but heartfelt. Emma and Lily organized a small gathering, where neighbors shared stories, food, and plans for the coming seasons. The garden glowed softly with strings of lights, the air filled with laughter and the sweet scent of fresh herbs. In the quiet moments, Emma reflected on the journey so far, the obstacles overcome, the friendships forged, the moments of doubt turned to triumph. She understood now that the path was never straight or easy, but every twist and turn had shaped her in unexpected ways. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, "Roots grow deep when the soil is tough." Emma smiled, feeling those roots stretch and strengthen beneath her feet. As the snow began to melt and the first buds of spring peeked through the earth, Emma felt ready for the next chapter. The garden would bloom again, and so would she, with courage, hope, and the knowledge that one small seed could change the world. Spring arrived like a breath of fresh air, washing the city in soft pastels and new beginnings. The alley garden, once dormant beneath winter's hush, now burst with life. Tender green shoots pushed through the soil, and vibrant flowers dotted the corners where once there had only been concrete and shadows. Emma stood amidst the flourishing beds, sunlight warming her face, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and anticipation. The garden was growing, and so was she. The transition from winter to spring marked not only a shift in the seasons but a turning point in Emma's journey. The community garden initiative funded by the city was in full swing, and Emma's team was busier than ever. Volunteers from all walks of life gathered regularly, transforming neglected spaces into patches of hope. The mobile classroom rolled into new neighborhoods, carrying lessons and laughter to children who had never imagined growing their own food or understanding the science behind it. Emma found herself at the heart of a movement bigger than she had ever dreamed. Yet with this growth came new challenges. Coordinating schedules, managing resources, and keeping everyone motivated tested her leadership in ways that school never had. At times, the pressure felt overwhelming, the responsibility heavy. One afternoon, as Emma was organizing seed packets for an upcoming workshop, her phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from Harvard. Their admissions office had noticed her recent community impact and invited her to apply early for a special youth innovation scholarship. The invitation was a mix of honor and daunting expectation. Emma's heart raced as she reread the message, imagining the possibilities and the path ahead. But amidst the excitement, doubt crept in. Could she balance the demands of her projects with the rigorous application process? Would she be able to meet the high standards set by one of the world's most prestigious universities? The fear of failure shadowed her thoughts. That evening, Emma sat with her mom, sharing the news and her anxieties. Her mom listened patiently, then smiled. "Emma, remember why you started this journey. It's not about perfection or proving yourself to others. It's about making a difference, step by step. Harvard will see that. And so will you." Encouraged by her mom's words, Emma took a deep breath and began drafting her application. She wrote about the Alley Garden's humble beginnings, the community's strength, and the lessons learned along the way, the setbacks that taught her resilience, the friendships that nurtured her spirit, and the endless hope that fueled her work. She poured her heart onto the pages, determined to share her story authentically. Meanwhile, the garden buzzed with activity. Lily, now confident and vibrant, led a group of younger children in planting tomatoes and herbs. Emma watched with pride, realizing that her role was evolving from sole leader to mentor, guiding others to take up the mantle of change. As spring deepened, Emma faced a new challenge. An unexpected storm swept through the city, damaging parts of the garden and flooding some of their installations. Volunteers rushed to salvage what they could, working late into the night to protect the plants and repair the damage. The setback was tough, but Emma refused to let it dim their spirit. She rallied her team with renewed determination, organizing a community repair day that brought neighbors, friends, and strangers together. Amidst muddy boots and shared sweat, bonds strengthened, and the garden's roots dug deeper into the soil, and the hearts, of everyone involved. One evening, as Emma sat beneath the stars, reflecting on the whirlwind of months past, her phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Harvard, an invitation to an exclusive youth leadership conference to be held on campus later that summer. The excitement was overwhelming. This was more than an opportunity. It was validation that her work mattered, that her voice was being heard on a larger stage. Emma's mind raced with plans and possibilities. The garden, the mobile classroom, the community, they had all grown beyond the alley's walls. Her vision was spreading, inspiring others to believe in the power of one person's determination. Yet, amid the triumph, Emma held on to the humility that had guided her from the start. She knew this was just another step, not the destination. The real journey was in the lives touched, the seeds planted, and the courage to keep dreaming. As spring turned toward summer, Emma felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The garden blossomed around her, a living testament to hope, resilience, and the extraordinary power of a single girl's unwavering spirit. Summer arrived with the warmth of new possibilities, wrapping the city in golden light and the hum of life buzzing through every corner. Emma felt the energy pulsing through her veins as she prepared for the upcoming Youth Leadership Conference at Harvard. It was a chance not only to learn but to share everything she had built, the garden, the mobile classroom, the community, and to meet others who believed in changing the world. The weeks leading up to the trip were a whirlwind of planning, presentations, and last-minute preparations. Emma balanced schoolwork, garden activities, and interviews with local news outlets that wanted to tell her story. Her family and friends rallied around her, their pride and encouragement steady anchors amid the excitement and nerves. Finally, the day arrived. Emma boarded the plane with her heart pounding, not just because of the trip itself, but because of what it represented, a bridge between her small neighborhood and the vast world of ideas and influence waiting at Harvard. Stepping onto the campus was like entering a new universe. The ancient brick buildings and sprawling green lawns were both awe-inspiring and intimidating. Emma's eyes darted around, taking in the grandeur, the history, and the promise of what was possible. At the conference, Emma met young leaders from across the country and the world, each with their own stories of struggle, courage, and hope. The sessions were intense. Workshops on innovation, ethics, leadership, and social impact pushed her thinking further than ever before. But what struck Emma most were the moments of connection, the shared passion that transcended age, background, and geography. During one panel discussion, Emma was invited to speak about her garden project and how a simple idea had blossomed into a community movement. As she spoke, she felt a surge of confidence. This was her moment to inspire others, to remind them that change starts with small steps, relentless hope, and the courage to act. The audience listened in rapt silence, and when she finished, the applause was thunderous. Emma's cheeks flushed with pride and a sense of belonging she hadn't known she craved. Beyond the formal events, the conference offered unexpected adventures. Emma wandered the historic campus, explored the library's vast collections, and found quiet corners to reflect on how far she had come. Late nights were filled with deep conversations around campfires and shared dreams beneath the stars. One evening, as she sat on a bench overlooking the Charles River, Emma thought about the journey ahead. The challenges, the victories, and the people who had shaped her story. She realized that this experience was not just about Harvard or accolades, it was about growth, connection, and the power of community. Returning home, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. The garden welcomed her back like an old friend, and the familiar faces of volunteers and neighbors filled her with warmth. She shared stories from the conference, the new ideas she had gathered, and the friendships she had made. With summer in full swing, Emma and her team launched new initiatives, workshops on sustainable farming, science experiments for local kids, and partnerships with nearby schools. The garden became a hub of activity, creativity, and learning, a living classroom fueled by the summer sun and Emma's unshakable spirit. Yet amidst the success, Emma remained grounded. She knew that every accomplishment was a step on a longer path, and that true change required patience, resilience, and the willingness to keep pushing forward even when the road was uncertain. One afternoon, as she and Lily planted sunflowers that stretched tall and proud toward the sky, Lily asked, "Emma, what's the most important thing you've learned?" Emma smiled, wiping dirt from her hands. "That we all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small we start. And that hope is the strongest seed we can plant." As the sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over the garden, Emma felt a quiet joy settle in her heart. The journey was far from over, but with every new bloom, every smile, and every challenge met, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The late summer air hung thick with the scent of earth and blossoms, the garden alive with the busy hum of activity. Emma had grown into her role as a leader in ways she never imagined, her confidence deepening with every challenge she faced. Yet, with the approaching end of summer came a new kind of uncertainty. Harvard's scholarship application deadline loomed closer, and with it, the weight of expectations and the unknown future. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the leaves, Emma sat at her kitchen table surrounded by drafts of essays, recommendation letters, and college brochures. The quiet of the house contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. Was she ready for this next step? Could she meet the standards Harvard required without losing the essence of what made her story real and powerful? Her mother sat beside her, offering a gentle smile. "Emma, remember, this isn't just about impressing admissions officers. It's about sharing who you are, your passion, your heart. Don't lose sight of that." Taking a deep breath, Emma turned back to her writing, pouring everything she felt into the pages, the struggles, the triumphs, the people who had inspired her, and the lessons learned in the alley garden. Every word was a piece of her soul, crafted to tell the truth of a girl who dared to dream big. Days turned into nights, and Emma found herself oscillating between hope and doubt. Sometimes, she wondered if she was reaching too far, but then a phone call or a message from Lily or one of the volunteers reminded her why she started. The garden was no longer just a place, it was a community, a movement, a promise. As the application deadline approached, Emma submitted her materials with a mixture of relief and nervous anticipation. It felt like sending a piece of herself into the world, hoping it would be seen, understood, and valued. Then came the waiting. While the decision process unfolded, Emma threw herself even more deeply into the garden and community work. She organized summer fairs, science workshops, and volunteer days, determined to keep momentum and make every moment count. The garden had become a refuge and a stage, a place where she and those around her could grow and shine. One afternoon, as a group of kids laughed while planting new seeds, Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, heart pounding. The subject line read, "Harvard University admission decision." Her fingers trembled as she opened the email. The message began formally but quickly shifted to a tone of warmth and admiration. Emma had been awarded the Youth Innovation Scholarship, a recognition of not only her academic excellence but her remarkable impact on the community. The letter praised her creativity, leadership, and dedication, qualities that embodied the very spirit Harvard sought to nurture. Emma sat back, overwhelmed with emotion. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered a heartfelt thank you to the universe. This was the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and hope. Yet more than that, it was a new beginning. Celebrations rippled through the neighborhood. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered in the garden, their cheers filling the air alongside the scent of blooming flowers. Emma stood before them, humbled and grateful, knowing this achievement belonged to all who had believed in the dream and helped it grow. But even in this moment of triumph, Emma's thoughts turned forward. The scholarship was an opportunity, yes, but also a responsibility. She vowed to use this platform to continue advocating for change, to amplify the voices of those too often unheard, and to plant seeds of hope wherever life took her. As twilight painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, Emma reflected on the path that had brought her here. From the alley garden to the halls of Harvard, every step had been marked by courage, love, and relentless hope. The journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The day Emma stepped onto the Harvard campus for the first time as a scholarship recipient, the air buzzed with possibility and quiet awe. The sun filtered through the ancient trees lining the walkways, casting dappled shadows that seemed to dance in time with her racing heart. This moment was more than the fulfillment of a dream, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one she knew would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. Carrying a small notebook filled with ideas, sketches, and hopes, Emma moved through the bustling campus with wide eyes and an open heart. Students and professors hurried past, some pausing to offer welcoming smiles. For a 12-year-old, this world was vast and a little overwhelming, but Emma felt grounded by everything that had brought her here. The alley garden that had taught her resilience, the community that had fueled her passion, and the unwavering support of her family and friends. The orientation sessions introduced Emma to mentors and peers from across the globe, each with their own stories of challenge and triumph. She marveled at the diversity of thought and experience, realizing that the world was even bigger, and richer, than she had imagined. The rigorous academic environment was demanding, yet Emma welcomed the challenge, knowing that growth came from pushing beyond comfort zones. Her days quickly filled with classes on environmental science, leadership workshops, and innovation labs. Emma's voice was quiet but determined, her insights reflecting the lived experience of a girl who had already made a difference in her community. Professors noticed her unique perspective, often inviting her to share her ideas, while classmates sought her out for collaboration on projects. But it wasn't just academics that shaped Emma's time at Harvard. The friendships she forged became her second family. Young changemakers bound by shared dreams and the desire to make the world better. Together, they explored ideas, organized events, and supported one another through late-night study sessions and moments of self-doubt. Emma found a new project to champion, partnering with local communities around Harvard to create urban gardens that addressed food deserts and environmental education. It was a way to bring her journey full circle, to connect the privilege of the university with the struggles of neighborhoods like hers back home. One chilly evening, as she stood among seedlings in a freshly planted plot, Emma thought about how far she had come. The path was never smooth, marked by doubts, setbacks, and sacrifices. But through it all, she had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep moving forward despite it. In a campus lecture hall filled with students and faculty, Emma was invited to speak at a symposium on youth leadership. Her speech was a powerful testament to hope, resilience, and the impact one person can have when they refuse to give up. She spoke of the alley garden, the place that had seemed insignificant to many but had grown into a movement of change. She shared stories of community, of setbacks turned into lessons, and dreams nurtured by hard work and heart. The room fell silent, captivated by her honesty and passion. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from pride, but from gratitude. Gratitude for every hand that had helped her up, every voice that had encouraged her, and every challenge that had shaped her. As the applause died down, Emma looked out into the audience and said, "The road ahead is long and uncertain. But if we hold on to hope and remember that every small step matters, we can build a future filled with possibility." This is just the beginning, for me, for all of us. Walking off the stage, Emma knew her story was far from over. Harvard was not an endpoint but a launching pad. The garden would continue to grow, in the city and in her heart. The friendships, lessons, and dreams she carried would fuel the next chapters. Years from now, she might look back on this moment, the girl who faced a Harvard challenge at 12 and left a room speechless, not as a final victory, but as the spark that ignited a lifetime of change. Because the greatest power lies not in a single moment, but in the courage to keep going, to keep planting seeds of hope, and to never stop believing in the impossible. Emma smiled, ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?